Look at Dwayne Johnson in Spy Hunter, or Vin Diesel in Wheelman. You know, it's not too often that a movie that's supposed to go into production gets scrapped and then pivots into just becoming a video game, but surprisingly enough, it does occasionally happen. And every single time something like this has happened, it's been weird. So let's look a little bit closer here. Okay, but before we go any further, today's video is sponsored by War Thunder, the free-to-play cross-platform military vehicle combat game on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. And now they even have an all-new mobile version available for iOS and Android, allowing you to take the battle wherever you go. Take control of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 nations, from World War I biplanes to modern fighter jets and main battle tanks. Battle alongside 95 million players worldwide in massive battles across detailed, real-world inspired maps, and experience War Thunder's realistic graphics, authentic sound, and intense PvP combat. One of my favorite things about War Thunder is this insane level of detail. Everything from armor penetration to crew placement actually matters in battle, so every fight feels tactical and rewarding. War Thunder simulates vehicles in detail with realistic damage to components and physics-accurate armor and weapons. The X-ray view shows exactly how a vehicle was destroyed. War Thunder offers deep vehicle customization for all types of vehicles. So get War Thunder today on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or even mobile if you use our links below. You'll get a special bonus pack, free vehicles, premium account time, boosters, and more available for both new and returning players who haven't played in the last 6 months across PC and consoles. So grab your bonuses and start playing now. Click the links in the description and the pinned comment to join the fight in War Thunder today. That being said, the first game in this entry is pretty wild. In the infinite multiverses of different possibilities, there's a timeline where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, everyone's favorite natty actor, ended up becoming James Bond, sorta. You see, all the way back in 1983, an arcade game known as Spy Hunter released. It was published by Midway, but when this game was in development, it originally was supposed to be a James Bond tie-in game. The game was straight up inspired by James Bond, including the music of James Bond, and essentially it's a driving game. You get this like really cool car, and you destroy other vehicles and whatnot. But when the game was nearing completion, it turned out that the developer, Bally Midway, couldn't get the license to the James Bond theme or just the James Bond brand at all. So the game would pivot and become an original story, but still used the theme to Peter Gunn, which was a television show about an American spy that ran during the late 50s and early 60s. So while this game originally was supposed to be a Bond game, had it gotten that license, the butterfly effect from this game would have been pretty wild. You see, for an arcade game, Spy Hunter actually did surprisingly well, spawning a ton of different ports on various systems, a pinball machine, and even a sequel that wasn't made by the original team. And it also apparently wasn't very good. Years later, Midway would greenlight an updated sequel game to Spy Hunter, originally planned for the Nintendo 64, developed this time by Paradigm Entertainment, a studio that had a lot of experience working on different vehicle-type games. They did Pilot Wings N64, F1 World Grand Prix, even Beetle Adventure Racing. What a great game. Okay, it wasn't that good, but I mean, it's a crazy idea to sell a game on Beetle Racing. And while this game was originally supposed to be called Spy Hunter Returns, it later would just be called Spy Hunter, and was kind of a reboot, but still a sequel at the same time, and it still used the theme from Peter Gunn, so they had that going on. Now, the game did get delayed off of the Nintendo 64 platform, and instead would be set up to release on PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox, with different versions for Game Boy Advance, and it would also see Windows and Mac OS X, and a Zodiac release? Okay. The game sold pretty well. It reviewed alright, specifically the PS2 version getting the highest scores, and this time around, with the power of the generation that they were on there, they actually had a little bit of a story. In this game, you play as Alex Sex, an IES agent, which stands for International Espionage Service, and he has to like take down some group that has a bunch of letters in it, Nostra. It's kind of like the James Bond equivalent of Spectre, I guess. They're trying to do some stuff with like an EMP, but the big takeaway here is you get to ride this cool interceptor car, and it gets upgraded later, and there's all these cool things you can do, and it was a neat game. But with this game doing well, Midway was like, hell, this game worked in the late 80s, it's working in the 2000s, let's run with Spy Hunter and make it a big IP. They went on to make a sequel game, Spy Hunter 2, and this game did up the ante a little bit. There was more things your vehicle could do. There was a lot of effort put into making musical tie-ins. They got Vanessa Carlton to work on a song or use one of her songs for the theme here. This game still looked to James Bond for inspiration and took inspiration from other series series like Mission Impossible and added cool gadgets to the vehicle. However, the game still didn't review all that well, this time reviewing a little bit lower than the previous entry. It didn't stop Midway from wanting things to be even bigger for Spy Hunter, and in 2003, the same time as Spy Hunter 2 releasing, Universal Pictures acquired the film rights to the Spy Hunter series, and they had plans to make a film based off of the games. And with that, they signed on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to star in the film. This movie was actually moving along pretty well in pre-production. They had already assigned writers to the screenplay, Michael Brandt and Derek Hawes, and a budget was allocated of $90 million that would begin production in 2004 with a goal of releasing the film in summer of 2005. As pre-production was moving along, Midway moved along with what they wanted to do as a tie-in for the movie itself and recruited a development studio, Terminal Reality, to work on the next Spy Hunter game called Spy Hunter Nowhere to Run, which would star Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. However, while development was getting started on the game, the movie development was starting to stall out a little bit. The original screenwriters ended up departing from the project, and Universal assigned Mark Swift and Damian Shannon to replace the original writing team, but production was still ramping up to begin filming in June of that year. And Universal decided they found the right director for this project, John Woo. And now remember this name because surprisingly enough, the butterfly effect fallout of this game comes up again later on in this video, like really soon in this video. So just remember John Woo. He's involved in this project. They also then got another screenwriter, Zach Penn, to replace the two replacement screenwriters. And at this point, without a script in place, production on the film ended up getting delayed, pushing the movie back pretty much a whole year. About 9 months later, Zach Penn would end up getting replaced as a screenwriter by Stuart Beattie, who is now the replacement to the replacement of the replacements. So this meant the movie was delayed even further, and in turn, John Woo ended up leaving the project because of scheduling conflicts. This would eventually lead into the movie project fizzling out. However, the game's development would continue on, with Dwayne Johnson connected to it. So without a movie, in 2006, Spy Hunter Nowhere to Run, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, officially released on PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and this time we get to play as both the vehicle and Dwayne Johnson's character, this time Alex Decker. Yeah, they got rid of Alex X, and now his name's Alex Decker. Still an agent working in the International Espionage Service. There's still some bad guys with a bunch of letters in their names, and honestly, it's kind of like a generic spy thriller, but in a mid-2000s video game form. It's really not that deep. It's a little goofy at times. I mean, there's some funny moments just because it's Dwayne Johnson, right? Like, of course there's going to be some goofy stuff that happens, but surprisingly, they were trying to do something a little ambitious with the story, and the story, spoiler alert, kind of ends on a big cliffhanger that obviously never got revealed because they wouldn't make a mainline Spy Hunter sequel to this Dwayne Johnson game. And when the game released, the reviews were pretty harsh. It was mostly negative and mixed reviews. A lot of the key takeaways was that the game was like way too ambitious on the cinematic side at the cost of the gameplay not really being all that fun. And maybe they leaned too heavily into Dwayne Johnson and not so heavily into making a fun game. So for the most part, this game would go on and just be forgotten after its release. There would be one more Spy Hunter game that would release on the 3DS and PlayStation Vita in 2012, but it was a reboot and it also didn't do very well. And after all that, that was kind of it, except Dwayne Johnson himself actually made a little tongue-in-cheek comment about Spy Hunter a few years back when promoting Jumanji, and it's actually kind of funny. Take a look at this.
You were in the game too.
Yes, I was in the game. Yeah, Spy Hunter, classic Midway game. Dun, 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 dun. 2006. I'm still loving my 3 out of 10 review from Game Informer, by the way. 3 out of 10.
Okay,
Thanks, guys.
all right, fine.
I'm pissed at
okay,
that.
fine. But this is the first time that all 3 of us have been transported together into a video game, right? 3 out of 10 isn't bad.
It sucks.
It's not that bad.
Remember how just a few minutes ago I was like, hey, remember John Woo was involved in this project? Well, here we are. This is why that part was relevant. You see, back in the 90s, John Woo released a very successful film known as Hardboiled. The movie might have been a slow start at first, but eventually it ended up reaching wide international audiences and is often praised as having some of the best action sequences that were ever filmed. Moreover, John Woo and the team that worked on Hardboiled did at one point want to work on a follow-up film, going as far as even commissioning screenwriters to write out a script for a potential sequel, though the project ended up fizzling out. However, Midway, the game studio that just worked on Spy Hunter, was really trying to boost their lineups of IPs, and with John Woo establishing his own company known as Tiger Hill Entertainment, a partnership was made, and thus a sequel to Hardboiled, but in the sense chance of a video game sequel instead of a movie sequel, began development, and that would eventually lead to the release of the game Stranglehold. This isn't something we really ever get to see, a sequel to a movie that is in a video game form, but here we are making a video on the topic because the movie never ended up actually happening. It was just the video game form here. And it is a true to form sequel. It stars Chow Yun-fat, who was originally Inspector Tequila in Hardboiled. And while I haven't actually seen the entirety of the movie Hardboiled just yet, it seems like the plot follows a lot of the same beats, but also takes things in a new direction. And despite the fact that Spy Hunter with Dwayne Johnson didn't do very well, surprisingly enough, Stranglehold did do well as far as reviews were concerned, scoring around 77s out of 100s. And this game actually reignited interest in more to possibly come out of the Hardboiled series. It also seems like at some point there was a deal made from Lion Rock Entertainment who would make a potential sequel to the movie Hardboiled, basing the plot off of the script and story found in the Stranglehold game. However, later on, it seemed like some plans were possibly changed with the movie, and instead the film was supposed to be a prequel to Hardboiled, but still more things coming out of the Hardboiled series. However, when Midway Games ended up filing for bankruptcy, it seemed like there was never any updates of future film projects regarding Hardboiled since then. There was a sequel to Stranglehold that was in development called Gunrunner, but with Midway falling apart, the game ultimately ended up getting canceled. But the weird connections don't just stop here. This one might not fully count. Actually, there's like 2 half points here. They don't fully count for this video, but I just want to bring them up because they're all weirdly connected somehow. Not really, but you'll see what I mean. But the game Carmageddon, surprisingly enough, has a little interesting history if we get specific. The game that would eventually become Carmageddon, which was a pretty big deal back on PC games, originally started development as a game known as 3D Destruction Derby, and the game was greenlit by publisher SCI in 1995 under the condition that the game would be tied into some sort of licensed property to make sure that the game could get some sort of extra boost from market recognition. Now, the publisher wanted to use the Mad Max license, but they were unable to figure out who had the rights to the franchise, so instead they secured the rights to Death Race 2000, which was a crazy film from 1975, but there was a sequel that was allegedly in development, so this could have tied in perfectly. Now, remember how earlier when we're looking at Dwayne Johnson's Spy Hunter movie development film hell, whatever we want to call that? After John Woo left the project, Universal Pictures hired Paul Anderson to replace John Woo as the director, but he ended up leaving the project because he had another commitment, and that commitment was Death Race 2, that sequel that was supposed to tie in here. Okay, it's not the exact sequel. They were trying to get a sequel off the ground for like a decade, so technically the sequel that was planned during the time of this game that we're talking about here, it would have been like an early version that got scrapped. But you can see how these things are all like interconnected. They are just trying to revive these franchises. Nonetheless, though, the Death Race movie, at least in the late 90s, never ended up getting picked up all the way until later on we had the Paul Anderson Death Race 2 that later got an unrated version. However, as development on Death Race 2000, the video game, continued, publisher SCI was like a little worried because there could be controversy for awarding players points for running over pedestrians, which was like a big point of the game. However, the developers actually pointed to other video game series that had already been doing it that were kind of successful, like Quarantine and this game called the Die Hard trilogy, which was a single game based on the Die Hard trilogy that actually got its own sequel that is essentially Die Hard 4 in Las Vegas with its own plot, which we're not counting for the video here because it's not like they ever planned on actually making that plot a movie and then it became a movie. It was just a video game only story idea, but it's worth mentioning. So I guess that caused SCI to kind of calm down on the publishing front. But with the early version of Death Race 2000's sequel getting canceled, SCI was like, all right, you know what? This is an interesting idea. Make it your own IP. Turn it into something unique. And Carmageddon was officially established. And the game ended up being pretty successful for a PC game. It won Game of the Year for the 1997 PC Zone Reader Awards. It also got Driving Game of the Year. And while there were some controversies surrounding the game, it also getting banned in certain countries or getting edited heavily, it did end up establishing itself as a true new IP. It ended up getting 2 sequels, Carmageddon 2 Carpocalypse Now, what a name, and Carmageddon TDR 2000. A 4th game was planned, but that ended up falling apart. But the game series would eventually come back in 2015 under the name Carmageddon Reincarnation, which was when the developers, Stainless Games, reacquired the rights to Carmageddon, and they did like a Kickstarter campaign, and they were able to like release the game. It didn't score very well. And then THQ acquired the rights to Carmageddon. They did like a little tie-in known for their game Wreckfest, and that's all we know so far about Carmageddon.
I still remember my first run-in with The Matrix. It was around 2004, I was about 9 years old, and one weekend my dad decided we should watch The Matrix Revolutions. Back then we had like this pay-per-view rental on our TV, and those weren't cheap. It was like $20 or maybe even more to watch this movie. But my dad ordered it and we sat down and started watching the movie. But after about 10 minutes, he was like, this is boring, I'm gonna turn it off. And I mean, even though I was 9 years old, I do agree, it was really boring. So $20 on the train, and that was my very first experience with the Matrix franchise. But obviously, there were many fans of the Matrix, and many people enjoyed the movies. And when the Matrix trilogy wrapped up in 2003, the Wachowskis weren't quite finished with Neo's story. They did feel like they had to leave some concepts behind in the movie when it came to Neo, and there was some scenes they wanted to expand on. At the time, the Wachowskis were already leaning into transmedia storytelling with movies, comics, animation, and even video games. They had released Enter the Matrix, which is a story alongside the second movie, and they also were working on an MMORPG called The Matrix Online, which would continue the story beyond the third movie. So they figured that a game would be a much better story to tell Neo's hero story again, since fans would be actively re-experiencing the character's journey and then expand it in-game. And this idea materialized as Matrix Path of Neo, developed by Shiny Entertainment, who had also developed Enter the Matrix a couple years before this. And for this project, Shiny Entertainment actually developed a brand new engine that, according to them, was pushing the Xbox and PS2 to its limit. But unlike Enter the Matrix, which just told a side story with secondary characters, Path of Neo was pitched as a direct adaptation of the movies. Now, the Wachowskis actually were really hand-on with this, and they didn't just license out the Matrix, they actively wrote, directed, and even edited sequences for the game. Story-wise, the structure covered Neo's life from the moment he met Morpheus all the way to the final showdown with Agent Smith. They reused actual film footage, spliced in new cutscenes, to make it feel like you're experiencing the story that you experience in the movies, but with some new stuff. And then they would expand stuff like the office escape would become more of a focal point in the story than it was in the movies. One of the most fascinating and controversial parts, I guess, is Path of Neo's ending. In the films, Neo sacrifices himself to stop Agent Smith, surrendering to his fate. But this played out really weirdly in the games. You start fighting Agent Smith, and at the end you knock him out, and then this starts playing, which is like the Wachowskis talking to the players. And then yeah, what they said was gonna happen happens. Like the Smiths fuse into a skyscraper-sized monster, and you start fighting him. And then Neo eventually beats him, and he survives, which is a massive diversion from what happened in the movies. And you know, after the release in 2005, the reception was kind of mixed. Like there was some praise for the game, like the depth of the combat system and the commitment to fan service, but there was a lot of technological shortcomings, and the camera didn't really work that well, graphics looked dated, and the pace of the story felt really weird and wildly inconsistent. Like there was these deep philosophic moments, and then the directors appear on screen and they talk about how people want a kick-ass boss fight. It was just a weird concept. And then also the whole like mixing in the movie clips with cutscenes, like in-game cutscenes, was really jarring every time it like cut between them. And I think Elijah would have had a conniption if he saw this, because he already doesn't like it when games do like CGI versus in-game. So I don't know what he would have done if he saw this back in the day. So while most of the stories in this video are about games that started as movies, this one is unique. It's a rare case of a game born from a TV show that never aired, but then also the game never came out as well. In 2005, right after Revenge of the Sith, George Lucas announced something bold: the first live-action Star Wars TV series codenamed Underworld. This show wasn't gonna be about Jedi versus Sith. This was like a crime drama set in the underbelly of Coruscant between episodes 3 and 4. Now, for those that don't know much about Star Wars lore, Coruscant is like this like metropolis planet that's like a fully covered planet with city and like different levels and stuff, and there's like multi-trillions of people living on this planet. But nonetheless, for this vision, Lucas put together an all-star writing team. People like Ronald D. Moore from Battlestar Galactica, or Chris Chibnall, who would go on to run Doctor Who. And they just started cranking out scripts. Apparently, they wrote 60 scripts in like a 5-year time window. So after a couple years of workshopping the show and writing for it, in 2009 it was decided that LucasArts was gonna start working on a direct video game tie-in for this show, which at first had the Underworld codename, but we would get to know it as Star Wars 1313. The game was supposed to be an open-world RPG with episodic content that mirrored the show's like tone and like stories. And the game would also be set in the level 1313 of Coruscant, like the Underworld. But there was a little more to it than just a tie-in game. The game was constructed from the very conceptual bones of the show, show. And for a little bit, the TV show and the game were actually developed concurrently, which then led to the game obviously sharing a lot of ideas, designs, and lore from its source material, the show. They had big plans for this, and they even worked the introduction of level 1313 into season 2 of Star Wars The Clone Wars. So they even put this much foresight into it that they were strategically introducing it in a different show that wasn't even necessarily related to the things they were working on. But there was a big catch about the TV show. George Lucas told his writers to dream as big as possible and not to worry about the budget. You know what the results were? The show that would cost up to $40 million per episode, which with 60 scripts would have been $2.4 billion to produce. And to put this into context, Game of Thrones at its peak had some episodes cost around $15 million. And George Lucas was trying to do this in the mid to late 2000s, years before TV shows would even get anywhere close to a budget like this. And mainly because of that, in 2010, the TV show that was gonna be called Underworld was quietly shelved. But when the show stalled, the game had to pivot away since there was no longer a show to tie in with. So LucasArts scrapped the open world plan and renamed it to Star Wars 1313. They would retool the game into a more cinematic and linear action game, clearly inspired by games like Uncharted. And the game made its public debut at E3 2012. And I mean, this got people so hyped. Finally, a bounty hunter game that was gonna be set on Coruscant. This is something that people had been waiting for, and it looked good. Like, the things they showed up looked really fun. But apparently behind the scenes, it was not so fun. Yes, the E3 demo was polished and impressive, but it just showed a slice of the gameplay. And apparently, the game had been in development hell. A lot of the changes after the TV show cancellation caused issues, and there was also technical issues with the game's engine and development. And then on top of that, George Lucas actually would visit the development studio in the last year of production. And I mean, he liked the story and the stuff they were working on, but he demanded some changes to the game. He wanted the game's original new protagonist to be replaced by young Boba Fett. The plan was for the original hero to be killed off early in the narrative, at which point the player would assume control of the iconic bounty hunter for the rest of the game. This mandate pushed the development even deeper into development hell. And it seemed like that George Lucas didn't understand that video game development is like a structured process. And it's not like filmmaking where it's more easy to change stuff on a whim. And while his approach might have been creatively driven, it would just add another issue on top of the other issues they were already having. But as we all know, in 2012, Disney acquired Star Wars from Lucasfilms. And a couple months after that, in early 2013, Disney announced that it was ceasing all internal development at LucasArts. They said, after evaluating our position in the games market, we've decided to shift LucasArts from an internal development to a licensing model, minimizing the company's risk while achieving a broader portfolio of quality Star Wars games. And obviously this is mostly financially motivated, but they must have also seen that the game was struggling in development. Now, allegedly, Disney attempted to shop it around for other major developers, including like EA, to take over development on this game, but I'm assuming because of the deep-seated issues they had, they weren't very successful at finding anyone who wanted to take this over. And when that fell through, Star Wars 1313 was just completely dead, and in 2014, Disney even let the trademark for Star Wars 1313 expire. Over the years, there was more gameplay that would surface that I, sprinkled in throughout this section, and some of the concept that were both gonna be in the show and in the game later made it into other Star Wars media. Like, for example, the crime family, the Rang clan, was gonna be part of the narrative of the show and was mentioned in preview footage for Star Wars 1313, and they would eventually also show up in the book Dark Disciple and in Star Wars Rebels. And there are other things from the TV show that would show up in Star Wars today, but we only know a limited amount of what the game would have been like, so I can't say for sure that these would have also been in the game, but it is very likely there's other elements that would have been in the game that are in today's Star Wars stuff. But yeah, this isn't the only time I've talked about Star Wars 1313 on this channel, and the more I talk about it, I kinda still mourn that we didn't get this game. This would have been cool.
Now I think it's the perfect time to talk about Wheelman, the game that, look at that, literally has Vin Diesel's name right there on the cover. Now this game came out in 2009 and was developed and published by, who would have thought, Midway Games yet again. Honestly, I kind of am wondering why they went out of business. This game actually had a co-developer, a studio called Tygon Studios, which, upon further research, is Vin Diesel himself's personal game development studio that he owns, kind of. It's weird. So he has this other company that produces all of the films that he stars in, and under that company, he has Tygon Games, which seems to just like on and off make games. Sometimes they're defunct, sometimes they're working on a game. I'm not really 100% sure how that works, but let's get on track here. Wheelman 2009. It was originally supposed to just be a game and a movie together, like a new universe Vin Diesel was trying to start. The game was supposed to have a story that took place before the movie's story, but they were both being developed simultaneously. It was going to be a new movie series. Paramount even signed on to the movie, and that was kind of it. And the game entered development. Now, apparently, no script was ever written, and the movie side of things just evaporated. But by 2009, the game did release. And then we got Wheelman. You play as Vin Diesel's character, Milo Burek, who, I don't know. He's in like an open world Barcelona, Spain. And the game's story is kind of like half Fast and Furious, half spy thriller, which is honestly kind of just what a whole Fast and Furious is nowadays. But you get what I mean. And I don't know, the gameplay is okay, I guess. Surprisingly enough, Game Informer loved the shit out of this game. They gave the game an 8.5 out of 10. IGN, on the other hand, gave the game a 4.8 out of 10. So from my understanding, the game is probably somewhere in the middle. I'm sure some people liked it. I'm pretty sure it's not a masterpiece, but I mean, look at Vinny here. Look at what he looks like in his game. This is something that has existed.
Just think it's crazy. I mean, Diesel has a game development studio.
Dude, I like yes, by the way, and I was looking at the games they've developed, and there's some vaporware in there too. And I got this I went down this whole rabbit hole of vaporware games because of Vin Diesel's studio. So a video for a different time, but it's weird. But yeah, they did a few games. They did a Riddick game. They did a couple of Riddick games, actually. And they did Fast and Furious Crossroads.
Oh, wasn't that game like really bad? Like column level of bad?
Everyone seemed to give it 3 to 4 out of 10s, except Game Informer, who apparently just loves Vin Diesel. They gave that game a 5 out of 10. So
wait, they gave The Rock a 3 out of 10, and this slop a 5 out of 10. God damn it, dude!
Yeah, but this is Vin Diesel, dude. This is different.
I don't know. You Vin Diesel fan, huh? I'm a The Rock fan, you know.
I mean, ask Game Informer.
So we've talked about Enslaved, Odyssey to the West on this channel before, and as we looked into this topic, we learned that this also started out as a project that was going to be a feature-length animated film. And Ninja Theory, who is the developer of the game, also was going to be the developer of the movie. And they went around and pitched this movie to different Hollywood studios, and they were gonna produce the movie and render it in Unreal Engine 3, like the whole thing. Apparently, you know, the Hollywood people they went to did not care, didn't understand what they meant by like real-time rendering, and they just weren't interested in this product, even though Ninja Theory apparently went in with the angle that it was gonna be cheaper than a Pixar movie. Like, you know, it takes less time to render something in real time in Unreal Engine. So they got rejected across the board. After that rejection, they pivoted into making this a video game, and that's obviously what we saw eventually. And they secured a deal with Bandai Namco to publish this game. This whole game is kind of weird. I don't know. I remember seeing it back in the day, and actually this game came out and I went to the store with a friend and he picked it up for the 360 because he said he heard good things about it. We go to my house, we put it in my 360, and it was just awful. It was just boring as. And then, like, he just bought this game, but he just didn't want it. So he just left it at my house, and I still have the copy somewhere. It was so bad, he just, like, gifted it to me. But, like, I don't know. I didn't want it either. But I guess I had it. I don't know. So, financially, this game was also a failure. It did not meet the sales expectation they had. You know, it was criticized for its boring gameplay. People did speak positively about the story and the writing and these cutscenes and stuff. But, like, I don't know. I wasn't really impressed by the game. There was some notable people involved in this project, though. The screenwriter for 28 Days Later, Alex Garland, actually wrote for this game. And then also the performance artist Andy Serkis, you know, famous for like characters like Gollum or the ape from Planet of the Apes, also was a character actor for this. And, you know, they were heavily involved in the making of this game. But they had plans for a sequel, apparently. But because it did so bad, they canceled any future plans of that. People nowadays look back at it and say it's like a hidden gem, or like, you know, it's underrated, it got underappreciated. But I don't know. I'm pretty sure sure if I put it in nowadays, it'd still be boring.
I remember watching a cutscene for that game on YouTube, and I thought it was wild. I don't know how to explain what I was looking at, but there was a lot going on. Maybe the Hollywood execs knew what they were doing by rejecting the pitch for the movie.
And I mean, like, I don't know, it's not like the game did well either. You know what I mean? Like, definitely.
And then Xbox was like, we need to buy this studio. It wasn't exactly like that, but I have a really goofy game that I wanted to talk about, and I don't really know anybody who's ever played this game or even remembers this game, but there was a game known as Defiance, which was an MMORPG, which is really interesting because the more you look into it, the more scuffed the whole situation is around this game. Defiance was originally planned to be a television series, but in this specific case, the television series was in fact made, and it was a sci-fi original show, like a show on the Sci-Fi Channel, Defiance. It was an MMO third-person shooter, and they launched this TV show at the same time in April of 2013. But here's where things get really, really weird. This is like some sci-fi, terraformed Earth in the future, dystopian storyline that the TV show had, and then you could watch the show, then you go over to the MMO third-person shooter, and you play the game, and it released on not only PC, but it also released on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, which is kind of a big deal if you think about it, because back in early 2013, MMOs on like the console weren't really a thing. So this was like groundbreaking. The game was very okay, I think. I'm sure there were some people who liked it, but across the board, the reviews were pretty mid. But the TV show was also pretty mid, which led to an interesting dynamic between the TV show side of things and the video game side of things.
You know, I actually played this game.
You played Defiance?
I went to GameStop and I saw like the disc for like $2 or something. And I was like, oh, I've heard of this MMO. So I bought it and I played it a little bit.
Did you like it?
It was fine. It was just kind of weird. I mean, I don't want to spoil what happened to you.
Right. So what happens is quite interesting. You see, ultimately the show got canceled after 3 seasons, which is actually a lot further than most people probably thought the show would make it to. However, when the TV show was canceled, the video game version was planned to be continued on, despite the fact that the show would be over. Now, the development studio, Tron, actually said after the TV show's cancellation that the new update coming to Defiance would serve as essentially season 4 of the TV show, and that the story would be continued on, and that they would keep the game going as long as people were interested in the game. However, before the show was canceled, there was already weird things happening behind the scenes with the game side of stuff, because the game launched, like we said, on the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC in 2013, the same year that the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One released. Early on, there were no plans to bring the game to the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. So if you wanted to play this game and you were a console player, you had to play it on your old Xbox 360 and PS3 until they eventually rolled out newer versions. But like by mid 2014, the studio was saying they were just exploring the possibility of porting the game to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Matter of fact, despite the fact the show was canceled and season 4 story was continued on in the game, they didn't actually confirm a console release for the then current generation consoles until 2017. They announced that it was coming and that Defiance would be getting a big update, and they were going to rebrand the game as Defiance 2050, kind of like one of those sequels, but it's not really a sequel. It's just the same game with like a new title. And then finally in July of 2018, Defiance 2050 released, and it also came out on Xbox One and PS4. 2018 is a crazy amount of time to not have your game accessible if you're trying to like reach console audiences. If you were like a day one player on the Xbox 360, you had to continue to play on your Xbox 360 until 2018. Then you could finally migrate over. What's weirder is because you think it would be as simple as just migrating over, because like we said, they didn't want to do a sequel. They're like, this is going to be, you know, the same game, but updated. Except you couldn't actually bring your old character over from the first game to the second game.
I can't remember why. Because they changed the classes. They replaced all classes with new classes, so there was no old classes anymore. So like, that's why they couldn't carry it over, because the old characters didn't exist anymore.
Why?
This is 2050 now, dude.
I guess, yeah. I mean, was the original one free to play?
Initially, I don't think it was, but they did make it free to play. I think initially it launched with monthly subscription. They eventually went free to play before 2050 came out.
Well, in 2020, it was announced that Defiance for the Xbox 360 at least would be shutting down later that year. However, PC and PS3 servers would continue to remain for a while. Defiance 2050 didn't last much longer after its initial launch. The 2050 version was still running until 2021 when it was announced that that game was shutting down also, and that was it. They shut it all down. Man, this is a shame. I wish I could go and try this game out now because it just sounds so goofy.
I got a surprise for you.
What is that?
You can actually play it as of this year. I just saw it and I was like, huh? Is this real? I thought I'm getting pranked. But then I found the site and I'm actually installing it right now. I was like, what the hell? I had to double check for myself. I download that launcher and now like I'm installing it. I'm like, what's going on?
Oh yeah, look at that. Wait, it's not even just coming back. It is back. They launched the original version, not the 2050 version.
As of April this year. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they are available on console. It might just be a PC only thing, which I think this is what it is. But yeah, I'm installing it right now. You can play it. That's actually crazy.
It's like Gigantic coming back.
Yeah, but Gigantic was atrociously bad.
We did definitely try to play Gigantic when that game finally did come back after being shut down for a few years, and it was not a fun experience.
Yeah, why did they bring it back? I guess just to scam like 10 players that actually would buy it.
Did you ever watch the Alien vs. Predator movies back in the early to mid 2000s?
Oh yeah, definitely. Did
you like them?
Bangers.
I vaguely remember watching one of them as a kid, but I'd never seen any of the Alien or Predator movies before watching that movie when I was younger. But I remember there's one and they're like, I don't know, I think there was some snow outside and they were like in a temple or something.
In the pyramid.
Maybe. And then there are predators there and they're like, oh, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And then they team up with the predator. Does that sound like one of the movies?
Yeah, one lady teams up with them.
Is that the first one or the second one?
That is the first one, because the second one is set in a American town.
Oh, did they do well?
I know that people who like Predator as like, young adults and like the Aliens as young adults did not like these movies, but I didn't care. I've only ever seen Aliens and I didn't really know about Predator yet, so I thought this was the coolest shit ever.
The reason I bring this up though is because there is an Alien vs. Predator video game that released in 1994, which is wild in itself. Now, as it turns out, Alien vs. Predator, which I didn't know about this until I started doing research here, started off as a comic book series. They were trying to adapt the comic book series into a film form, and in turn, they wanted to have a video game that would coincide with the launch in the 90s of the Alien vs. Predator movie. Now, the script for that film adaptation ended up getting scrapped altogether because they wanted to go down a path with a different script, and then that went into development hell, and then later on the movie finally got going and they did the film in 2004, but the story was completely different. However, that original film script was used as the basis for this 1994 beat 'em up game that was in arcades. The game was actually like pretty well loved. It's like still put down as like one of the greater beat 'em up games of the 90s, especially arcade games. So just kind of interesting that Alien vs. Predator, like as a video game form. I mean, I guess it was a comic before that, but like the franchise existed before just like a little movie mashup in the early 2000s.
Kind of makes me want to watch the movies again.
I'm honestly surprised they never did a third one.
We're getting a new Predator movie this year, I think, still. We'll see. Maybe one day they'll diverge again.
And while the other Alien vs. Predator games that did release were not necessarily based on the scrapped script, but were just like inspired by the comic book series, I wanted to point out though that the Alien vs. Predator box art for the Atari Jaguar looks insane because it definitely looks like what you would think an Alien vs. Predator movie in the 90s would look like. I just wanted to point that out because it really makes you think about like this what if timeline where the movie did come out in the 90s and not the 2000s.
This next one is kind of really old. The game that we're going to talk about came out actually in 1995, but the story of it started a little bit before that and actually started in the 1980s. And originally, this game was a concept that Steven Spielberg had come up with for a TV series called Amazing Stories. It was going to be in one episode thing, and then later he was going to turn the concept into a feature film as well. But when it came to making the movie, the budget was gonna be too high, and Spielberg's vision for like the sci-fi alien world was just like too much for the late 80s, early 90s, and so he had to shelve the idea. But then he went to LucasArts and, he approached George Lucas and was like, hey, buddy, want to make this game? And he was like, hell yeah, brother. I mean, that's just what I assume happened, right? I don't know. That's just...
No, I'm pretty sure that's written in the history.
And then eventually, by 1995, the game was done and it was called The Dig. And it released. And it's like what do you call it? Like an adventure game, right? Like Monkey Island or whatever, like Day of the Tentacle, what LucasArts was known for back then. I mean, I think the game did diverge a little bit from Steven Spielberg's vision, but I mean, it was still the whole alien planet archaeological thing that he envisioned.
Did people like it?
Actually, yeah, people seem to like it. It doesn't have a lot of reviews, but it does have a 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb, which is actually not that bad. And that's kind of the stuff I see matched on the other sites too. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the point-and-click adventures LucasArts did were really good for the time. I don't know. I even played some as a kid and really enjoyable. Yeah.
This one I wasn't even really sure if it counted, but I just wanted to give it a little mention here. But Tron, that movie from the 80s, wild movie in itself. The movie initially didn't really do like fantastic in the box office, but it did gain a cult following over time. And there were always talks of doing a Tron follow-up movie in the form of Tron 2.0. Interestingly enough, though, the video game got greenlit for development in 2003, and there was a game called Tron 2.0 that released. It was a first-person shooter game. Every time Tron was ever talked about, they were always like, we want to make another movie, but we'll have to see how things go. And apparently this video game was a deciding factor also on if they could potentially make a Tron movie. I guess it didn't do well enough because we didn't get another movie for years. I don't think this one counts because I don't necessarily think they took a script that was supposed to be a movie and made it into Tron 2.0, but they called this the straight up sequel to Tron. So I wanted to at least give it a mention.
It's like a half point, kind of.
Yeah. There's a couple other half points. I mean, they're not really half points, but they're kind of
0.7 points or like.
We'll talk about them. Yeah, I'd say like 0.76 points.
Okay.
Okay, Ghostbusters and the Back to the Future video game. The thing about Ghostbusters that is really interesting is that not only does it pull plot points that were intended to be in the first Ghostbusters movie that ended up getting scrapped and then reuses those ideas for points in the game itself, but it also took ideas from the canceled Ghostbusters 3 film, Ghostbusters 3 Hellbent, which was in development hell all through the 90s. So at the very least, these ideas did at least get to be used and were included in the game release in 2009. So, I don't know, that's kind of cool, right? At the same time, the Back to the Future Telltale game is not a sequel. We are fortunately never going to get Back to the Future 4, I think. I hope. But what's interesting is they did work with some of the creatives who did the Back to the Future trilogy, and in the story for the Telltale version, they took deleted plot points that were intended for Back to the Future Episode 2 and re-implemented them into the game there. Some of the points that are featured in this game, spoiler alert, are the exploration of things like the Prohibition era or even Doc's family history, which are implemented into the game, things that were not included. And while this isn't like a new canon, this is its own universe, it's still kind of interesting that we get to see a little bit more into the Back to the Future universe, and they fleshed out some of these ideas in the Telltale game.
Actually, I'm looking into this last one I had, and it's not really, doesn't really count actually.
What is it?
Basically, it is the author that wrote books like Coraline, which were turned into movies. He had this other idea he was going to turn into a book, and then maybe it's going to be a movie, but he actually turned it into a video game. There's no concrete evidence that it was ever going to be a movie.
What's the game?
Wayward Manor, and released in 2014. Like, the project is more like an indie game. I don't think this is like a big studio, because like the game is like $7 on Steam, and it's the only game they ever made. So I don't know much about the development studio. There's not much known about it either. But he said that he was playing around the idea of this for a book, and then he was like, oh, what if someone could interact with it? So I don't know, it doesn't really count because it was going to be a book, not a movie, but yeah.
We'll count it. We'll put it in the video. Don't forget to check out War Thunder on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile using our links below. New players and 6-month inactive users also get a huge bonus pack across PC and consoles. Cool. Well, I feel good about this list. If you guys like the list or you feel like we missed something, let us know in the comments down below. Maybe we'll cover it in a future video. Also, huge thank you to our patrons and our YouTube members making longer videos like this possible. And is there anything else you wanted to add, Luke?
Very excited to play Defiance.
All right, well, we'll see you guys soon with the new upload. Make sure you guys check out our videos that we have and the one that YouTube's telling you to watch. And we'll see you guys soon with a new video. Bye, guys.